Hey everyone, Marc Tassin here. Welcome to Out of Character episode 10, show where your favorite creators drop out of character for an hour to talk with game designer and host Marc Tassin, that's me, about their art, their process, and the nerdy stuff that inspires them. From the secrets behind their craft to the ins and outs of the business to the games, shows, and books that they can't get enough of, it's a unique and candid look at the people who create the stuff that you and I love. So comments will be open throughout the show. So feel free to drop in any thoughts you have or questions. We'll try to grab things when we can and bring those in as well. So without waiting any longer, I'm very excited tonight to introduce our guest, Gene Ha. Gene, welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. So I hope that people know who you are, but on the off chance that someone has stumbled upon this and is like, Gene, who? Can you tell folks who you are and what you do?
Not Doctor Who, just the Doctor.
Just the Doctor. Exactly.
My name is Gene Ha. My dad was actually named Dr. Ha, but instead of being called Dr. Ha, he would be called Dr. H.A. over the hospital PA system because they didn't want to, for people coming new to his name, they didn't want to be yelling Dr. Ha, Dr. Fine over the PA system. But yeah, I'm perfectly comfortable with the Ha last name. And I am a comic book artist who's been working on mostly superhero books for the last 25 plus years. Various things like a lot of X-Men books, Justice League, Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman type stuff. My creator-owned book that I've written and drawn, May, M-A-E. So like May West. And just a lot of covers and small projects and weird stuff I enjoy doing. So yeah. I am a huge tabletop role-playing fan and a fan of Gen Con, and I was raised in Indiana.
Oh, all right. Excellent. So going to Indianapolis for Gen Con is like not a stretch for you to go back to your home, so to speak.
Yeah, it's well, keeping in mind that South Bend there's no direct highway from South Bend to Indianapolis. So, but you had to get there if like there was a big event in the state. So this arduous journey to the big city, which had this kind of weird glamour to it, kind of like Chicago, but Indiana. So, you know.
Well, I'm going to just share a little bit of your work just so folks can kind of see some of the things that you've done. I mean, your stuff is gorgeous. It's clear why you've been doing this for 25 years, right? I mean, it's just absolutely fantastic. Here's May. That's one I wanted to show off as well. You know, do you mind if I just start by asking a little bit about May?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is what you would call a creator-owned comic, right?
Right.
And so
novels, it's really important to distinguish which ones are creator-owned.
Right. And so to help folks who don't know a lot about this and don't know a lot about this business, you know, talk about what creator-owned means, what it means to the creator to have it be creator-owned as opposed to work for hire for some other company.
Oh, man. Well, I mean, you know, God bless DC, God bless Marvel, and all the other corporate IP companies that own the wonderful superheroes so many of us love. But they have to protect their works. And if your creative vision tends to cross where they're trying to protect their character, they will tend to ban it. Often, you know, usually that's a good thing, but when it hits you, it's annoying. So yeah. If you don't want to deal with that, that's when you do a creator-owned book. When you have your vision out there. I'm going to give an example that's kind of about exactly 10 years old now, pretty much. When they launched the New 52 at DC Comics, they had an event before it, a big crossover event, which everyone understands what a crossover event is now. I can't believe it.
I know, right?
So I was part of the Flashpoint event, which was needed. They didn't tell me anything about the New 52 coming. So I got to work on the Superman book, and I had the idea that we're going to have a weird variant Superman who's going to wear a little bit of armor. And then the line came down from the top of DC. No, Superman is bulletproof. He does not wear armor. And in fact, no version of Superman should wear armor. So we took the armor off him. I had to redraw all these scenes. And then the New 52 came out the month after my last issue came out, and he was wearing armor. which is fine. But the thing is, if they'd let me put some armor on that character, everyone would have said, "Oh, that's brilliant." Flashpoint connects to 52. This is some type of weird alternate reality crossover bleed thing where like the armor bled from one to the other, and that's why he's wearing armor now. No, no, it's just they. Anyway,
Yeah,
it's
but I
all
mean
things.
that's the thing is like right. So I mean, it can certainly get in the way of sort of your creative vision. You know, that's
Yeah.
clear.
Well,
And
yeah.
are there
Well, you're also
business
dealing
needs?
with a committee.
Yeah.
You're working with a large committee, and they have different opinions, and not
Got
all of them agree with each other even. So,
Yeah, so it sounds like, some of the things I heard, Jim Zub was on the show last week and he talked a little bit about sitting in the room planning out the storylines, right?
yeah.
And that's a very different experience than I think some people sort of picture comics authors and artists just sitting around quietly on their own going, "I've sent you a wonderful story, publish it next week." It sounds like it's nothing like that at all from the sounds of it.
I've only been on one of those, and it was evenly divided between me and a writer who weren't sure what to do, and me and another artist who were 100% confident on what to do, with a lot of ideas that the editor and the writer didn't like. So
Nice. So it can certainly be a challenge then, and one of the advantages of creator owned is that you own it. And
yeah.
are there like business elements to this as well that change? I mean, do you have to do a whole lot more in terms of how you sell it, or
Yeah. Yeah. If you have a creator-owned book, then just like with most prose novel authors, it is, except in very rare cases, it's your job to promote it. It's your
Mm,
job to get word out there, get it out to readers, help people to find it, go to shows like Gen Con or C2E2 and talk to people and talk to critics, bloggers, fans, everybody.
yeah.
The, so this is the funny thing about working corporate. It's exactly the same thing usually.
Hmm.
Where for most of the books out from Marvel and most of the books out from DC, they have so many titles. There's only a few that highlight. I was going to say every month, but frankly, really every year.
Yeah.
And usually the ones that kind of involve big crossover, important things to the whole universe events. So if you got the quirky, beautifully written, critically acclaimed Darling,
Right.
yeah, with not important sales numbers and stuff like that, it's still your job to get out there and promote it.
That's true in a lot of the creative industries, though, I think. And a lot of people don't realize that
Yeah.
for authors writing novels, a lot of times there's a lot of promotion they have to do on their own, despite the fact it's got like that big name imprint on the side of it. Folks just don't realize how much effort the creative has to put into making that sell and getting it in front of folks.
Oh yeah.
So, and not most people's favorite thing either is trying to do all of that.
Yeah. I will say, I mean, if you do work for a big company like Marvel or DC, or if you're writing a novel for
Yeah.
Star Wars or something like that, you don't go into it unless you understand that there's a limit to how much you can change their universe and change their characters, and you have a vision that you think that you want to make fit into what they're already doing.
Hmm.
It can be really difficult, but I mean, once you have that drive, and I love so many DC and Marvel superheroes, I really enjoy it. But I'm at the artist end usually when I'm working for those companies,
Yeah.
and I don't go through half the heartache as the writers do, who are the ones who get to watch somebody else kill their darlings.
Right. Well, at the same time, one thing that has come up a few times when we've talked to folks here is about IPs, right? And how,
Yeah.
in order for an IP to be successful, there's a certain amount of, you want to be creative, you want it to be new and fresh, but if you go too far away from what it is, the reason people like it gets undermined, and you start to have people become, and I'm not talking about toxic, yeah, they ruined my childhood, right? I'm just
Yeah.
talking about, at some point, Spider-Man needs to climb walls, right? And spin
Yeah.
webs. You take those things away and you start to end up with a different sort of story. And, it seems like there has to be a balance there in terms
Yeah.
of bringing that in.
Yeah. There's a thing of sometimes stripping down a character and taking away an element to see how they cope with the world without that. But
Yeah,
if that's a thing that everybody enjoys by that character and you drag it out for too long, you're ruining the fun. You're a
right.
fun ruiner.
It's one of the things they used to talk about is putting the toys back on the shelf when you're done. You can take them all down. You can
Yeah.
tell any story you want. You can take away things, make them different. But when you're done, you have to put them back together, put them on the shelf so the next person can play with them.
Yeah.
And the way that it works.
Yeah, a way I like to think of it is it's both you putting the toys that you were given back on the shelf in
Yeah.
condition so that other people can play with it, but hopefully also you get a really good feeling when you add a new toy that other people can also add to the toy chest and play with along with that doll.
All right. What's your favorite toy you've added to the toy chest?
Oh man. Well, there's a lot of affection I have for and this isn't quite a new one, but I got to
Mhm.
draw the teenage, actually, the grade school and teenage years of Cable.
Okay.
I have, I assume at some point, if they keep playing with Cable inside the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they will get to his childhood,
Uh-huh.
and that'll be me. It hasn't happened yet. No one's
How
contacted
awesome
me.
would that be?
Yeah,
That'd be great. You
yeah.
know,
So if you love Cable, yeah, demand his TV show, demand more movies.
exactly. You know, you brought up the MCU, and that's funny because earlier you were saying that, people know what a crossover event is and they know what
Yeah,
a multiverse is. It's completely bizarre to me that I live in a world where those are common knowledge now.
yeah. Like when the first successful superhero movies came out, it tended to be a simple premise like superpowered being from another planet lands his baby on Earth, or
Yeah.
child's parents are killed before his eyes, and he happens to be a billionaire, so he uses the wealth and the time to train himself to be the most effective unpowered crime fighter in the world. Or X-Men, which is
Yeah.
we were all just born this way, we can't help it, and people hate us for it. So when they began at the end of the first Iron Man movie, had the first credit scene
Yeah.
where Nick Fury is inviting to join the Avengers Initiative. I thought I really enjoyed that, but that will never effing work. That will never work. No one's going to accept that. Of Norse gods and magicians and subsea kings and
Right.
Hulks all playing together in the same team, and it's like no, no one will accept that. It will never work.
It's fascinating. I thought that one of the cool things about Thor was Kenneth Branagh directing it after doing Shakespeare and saying it's really not that much different than Shakespeare. And I was like going,
Oh no.
"Oh my God, we are tackling Thor." He goes, "Yeah, because if you don't do it right, it's one of the most ridiculous things you could possibly imagine, and no one
Oh,
will buy into it." And yet they pulled it off.
yeah.
It's-
Yeah. I'm I'm uh I'm horrible with my Shakespeare titles. So Kenneth Branagh did the
was it Richard the Third or
I'm not sure, but anyway, he did the one where he
yeah,
started the king. And if you look at how at that movie, it's both really delightful, entertaining Shakespeare, and it's also a really goofy movie in some ways. Like especially
Mhm.
the fight scenes where it's just like slow motion scene of myself looking heroic and running, and it's kind of like that guy has a little bit of a natural sense of humor, so he understands both sides of Thor. And
Yeah,
when I can't remember his name right now, Waititi, I'm
Takiti. Uh, how do
I'm
you say
sorry,
his
sorry,
name? Oh my
because you're a
gosh, I'm going to
brilliant. I'm
say
such
his
a
name
fan.
so wrong. We all know. Everyone listening
Taika
knows who
Waititi.
we're talking about.
Taika
So.
Waititi. Okay. Anyway, Waititi. Yeah, Waititi. Yeah, when he did his, he was brilliant enough to understand that it is a little bit hard for most compared to the other Marvel superheroes they've done movies about. Thor's a little bit harder than the rest,
Yeah.
and he just amped up the goofy parts and said, people are going to really enjoy. That's what I love about the character, and I think other people will enjoy the goofy parts. And he just amped up the slow motion. I'm in love with myself, and here's my hair flowing in the wind. I
Yeah,
thought, man,
it just I feel like, and I think that most people who go to Gen Con, especially folks that are closer in age to ourselves, are like, we lived through the dark times, right?
yeah,
This is like the golden age of nerd media. It's like from Lord of the Rings to Marvel Universe. I mean, the things that Dune we never thought would happen, right? After
yeah,
shows like the original Captain America movie where he faked a upset stomach to leap out of the car.
yeah.
Uh,
Oh man, yeah,
so
so
now
many dad movies.
you have played, you were just talking about playing role-playing games. And I know that you actually played in a D&D group at a local game store for a long time, or comic store. Is that right? Am I getting that
Yeah.
right?
I mostly started playing D&D after I stopped playing at one friend's house. the first time I met a group of people I'd never met before was at the Griffin, the local gaming shop in downtown South Bend, Indiana.
Yeah. And I have to say that I'm gonna show a couple things you posted on Twitter, if that's all right,
Oh,
just
sure, sure.
because it's not everybody who gets an Eisner Award-winning comic artist in their
Oh,
weekly D&D game, sketching pictures of their characters.
uh, those are modern. Oh, that's not the ones I started off doing in the early 1980s. This is the recent stuff I've been doing. When there was a D&D campaign being played at Camara's Comics in LaGrange,
Yeah.
Illinois.
Okay, yeah, that's the one that I was reading about. And so you played in this campaign. Are you still gaming in that group, or have you stopped because of
Uh,
COVID, or?
the pandemic kind of blew everything up, and then to deal with all of that, they then moved to a smaller space, which didn't have room for a game table in the middle anymore. So it's
Oh,
still a great shop, but not a good place to play role-playing games during sales hours.
oh, that's too bad.
Yeah.
So how did you get into D&D? Where did you discover it?
Oh, it's like a lot of kids get into cigarettes. My older brother and his friends.
I learned it from you.
One of those bad habits. I'm going to mention I was in Ontario, California for Comic-Con Revolution, and while randomly driving around before the con, I found out that Jack Chick Comics is based near where the convention was.
Really?
Yeah. And I came in all excited after the convention to try to buy up a pile of their anti-D&D comic so I could
Yeah.
give to all my D&D friends, but sadly, it's been out of print for years. So if people at Gen Con want to order a pile of anti-D&D comics for Gen Con, they'll print it up for us, but they don't
Oh,
have it on hand. I thought they would. I thought everyone would really enjoy it.
yeah. People who don't know should Google Chick Track if you've never heard of it before. CHIC, I think it is track, and that's you're missing out on an important part of Dungeons and Dragons history.
Yeah. So part of the horror of things falling a little bit out of popular culture and the horror of Google is that if you misspell something or even spell it right and do it, anything can show up now.
Anything can show up. It's really, spelling has become very important, weirdly enough, on the internet today.
Yeah.
If you're gonna get what you want. So your brother is your brother older or younger?
That was my late older brother. I have another brother who's younger than me.
Okay. So the one that introduced you to D&D, I'm picturing like one of those, someone was missing from game night and he grabs you and drags you over to play.
We actually played a lot together. And I would GM for his friends sometimes, but the funny thing is he didn't do a lot of he didn't go to like the local game shop so much. He didn't game there. And he was a football player. So he had a real life and real hobbies and dances and girls to make out with and stuff like that. And I was an unathletic nerd who was like, after he threw down his cigarette butts in the parking lot, I just like gathered them up and like, I'm going to smoke them forever.
I'm cool now. Look at me.
Yeah, I saw that. No one's going to kiss this mouth anyway.
Yeah. We have a friend who was, definitely ran with a different crowd than most of us did in terms of our sort of nerdy circle, and used to call it poker night when we'd play game night, because I didn't want to have to acknowledge what was actually going on at at the house. It's like, poker night. Yeah, that's it.
Oh man. So when I wasn't playing, after I mostly finished playing with ended playing with role playing games with my brother, I moved on to my friend Lowell Francis's house, who's part of the Gauntlet community today.
Oh,
and
cool.
I remember another friend there because, like me, Lowell was a nerd who was bad at sports and bad at dating at the time. And one of the friends who didn't only fit one of three of that description at one of the games yelled, "Raise your hand if you made out this weekend!" And like two guys, he and another guy raised their hands, and all the rest of us just went.
Good times, the memories.
Yeah.
So when you started playing D&D, what were you playing? What world? What edition? When did you get into it?
I started off with a different circle of friends. My older brother and some other older friends playing Blue Box D&D.
Okay.
Basic D&D. or I don't think it was called Basic D&D. That was just D&D.
Hmm.
And then we moved on to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, AD&D.
Right.
And I never really moved on to AD&D 2. I kind of skipped the next generations until 5 recently, where finally the rules made sense again to me.
Yeah, and it's funny because it feels like the fifth edition rules really harken back to some of the older editions more than the others have. I've loved playing all the editions, but the reality is that when I played fifth edition, I'm like going, this kind of reminds me of kicking off the red box, right? When I
Oh
was
yeah.
playing.
So I will say it is to have a thing with D&D rules over time. They tend to accrete,
Hmm.
and things that you could kind of house rule or just make up based on common sense or dramatic, dramaturgy or whatever, become official rules, and then nobody else can do it if they can't, by the rules, do it.
Right.
So I like the rules. I like game systems that have more room for just making stuff up as you're going along. I like the feel of being in a writer's room and just people are
Yeah.
shooting ideas back and forth.
Yeah, and that's a ton of fun. But at the same time, I like the dice because it's the old thing where I
Oh.
used to say where kids are saying, "You're dead. No, you're dead. No, you're dead," in a fake gunfight. It's like the dice solve that problem for you.
Oh no, yeah, it's all the thrill of gambling with almost no risk of having to drain your kid's college trust fund to keep playing. Unless
You're not the same sort of gamer as some people I know. I've made trade. Can you see all the games behind me? I mean, I got a basement full that's draining the kids' college trust fund. So the gambling comparison might be more apt than it seems.
if you pick the right games, you'll be able to sell them online pretty much soon for as vintage, collectibles and stuff like that. So.
Oh yeah, let's not talk about which of my games that I bought new are now vintage. I had someone ask me about some Star Wars figures. They go, "Where did you find those?" I was like, "Kmart on the shelf." I mean, it was 78, I guess.
Yeah,
Anyway,
if I hadn't worn my copies of Twilight 2000 into shattered separate sheets of paper instead of stapled books, yeah, that would I think go for a pretty good price nowadays. I've got a lot of books like that where if I hadn't loved them so much, they'd be really valuable today.
well, I want to keep talking about D&D and I could do this for forever, but I do want to also talk a little bit more about the stuff that you create and how you create it. One of the things that I think is really fascinating about you that I always enjoy watching is how much time you spend doing sketches for people at cons.
Oh,
And when you go to, I think you go to like libraries and things as well. And
oh
I've
yeah.
seen you doing these, and it's just, I think it's incredibly cool. Like, I don't know that this is necessarily one of the ones that you did for something like that,
No.
but oh, let me get back to, there we go.
Well,
Things like
actually, okay.
this. Yeah.
The two heads of Joker and Hot Girl
Yeah.
are both what I call pre-commissions, where I do a very polished, fancy sketch before the convention.
Hmm.
But it takes all my concentration while I'm doing it, so I can't talk to somebody while I'm drawing, which makes it a miserable thing to do at a convention because I like talking to people.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, it tends to be simpler or smaller sketches that I do there.
Yeah.
So if you actually go to the Dragonborn character from the D&D set,
Yeah.
okay, so this is a different process where when I'm playing D&D, I'm dragging it back to tabletop role playing game.
Right.
What I do with something like that is I draw when it's not my turn,
Right.
and it helps keep my mouth shut because obviously I like to blab. You can see me right here doing it. And in the course of a say 5-hour long campaign session, I will have finished one person's portrait in a very polished manner during
Uh,
all the time when I was shutting my own mouth up.
we have a buddy who is a couple of friends who are comic artists, Jake Miner and Matt Miner, and they used to draw during our D&D games all the time. So we've actually got a photo album of scenes from our many games like that. But the only problem we ever ran into is that, they would often get so into what they were drawing that you'd be like, Matt, did you keep track of your ammo? Matt, was your character following us or just staying back? So
I One of the ways I practiced drawing when I was in high school is I would draw while the teacher was lecturing, but I'd also write the notes too. And as a discipline, I would then show the notes to the teacher to show I was drawing, but I also got down notes on everything you said. Um, so that was really good practice for D&D. Switching this back to library conventions and
yeah, right.
bigger comic conventions. What happened is that when I first began going to comic conventions in the 1990s, they weren't really kid-friendly affairs. And frankly, for the most part, they weren't really woman-friendly affairs. So
Yeah.
you'd see these like 30-year-old something male comic geeks dragging behind them a woman or a kid who looked really, really bored. And that's how I started doing free sketches. I'd see these bored-looking people thinking they should have one good experience at this convention, and I would make a free drawing for them. And then it got to a point where other people would ask for free sketches, and to do that, I became famous for making people do a chat for people who looked like they weren't bored. They had to go through a challenge to get the free sketch. So I've had like a guy with a mustache and a bald guy walk up and down the aisles of a comic book convention, yelling at the top of their lungs, "I am the Walrus. I am the Eggman. I am the Walrus. I am the Eggman," and they got free sketches or things like that.
That seems worth it. I'm just saying, it absolutely seems worth it.
It got rid of the people who just wanted a free sketch, not because they liked my art, but just because they just wanted something free.
Right.
So you had to actually want it and actually appreciate it.
Well, I'm sorry I don't have pictures of you as some of the kids that you've done sketches for, because the joy on their faces when you do those for them are just amazing. And sometimes you put them in the sketch and it's just fantastic seeing.
A nice, if you are going to do a free sketch, a really simple trick I have is if you do a portrait of the person or a portrait of the person, of somebody the person loves in the sketch, both they'll value it more, and if they try to sell it on eBay, everyone else will value it less.
That's perfect, because at the end of the day, it's really about that moment where that kid or that guest is like, that's the moment for them. They will never forget it. They'll take it home and say, "I watched him draw it. I was right there." You know, it's just an amazing experience. So
only one person has ever tried to sell one of my portrait sketches on eBay, and it was of them as Spider-Man with the Spider-Man mask on and their beard sticking out, and it went for nothing.
Oh man, well, that's awesome, because I mean, that's just it, is you don't want to be firing off free pictures for someone just to go and try to cash in on eBay or something like that. It's a lot different than that. So that's very cool. So tell me a little bit more about Wonder Woman, that you're doing right now. It looks so amazing. So
so I did the issue 2 or volume 2 of Wonder Woman Historia: the Amazons, following in the after issue 1 by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Phil Jimenez.
Yeah.
And I worked with Kelly Sue DeConnick also on mine. And if you look at number 1, I've described it as Stanley Kubrick and Alexander McQueen decided to collaborate on a comic book. The designs are epic and intense, and frankly, he only got his issue done a few months before I got mine done, and we've been working for over a year.
Oh my
He's
God.
been working for much longer than me. So he kept adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. And I knew I wasn't going to stay sane and try to match what he was doing.
Right.
So I was going for a slightly different effect, a little grittier, and also if you look at this image here, playing with some optical illusions. This one's called an ambiguous image. So if you look at this, I don't know if you've seen it, but if everyone out there looks at this image and then squints enough, beyond having the face of the woman Hippolyta, the future queen of the Amazon, and her horse with the bear skull mask, the whole form fits together to form one big face, taking up most of the cover.
All right, now we're not going to get any talking. I'm just going to be sitting here going, I must see.
It helps if you squint and make it tiny, but I'll just give you the clue that one of the horse's eyes is one of the big face's eyes, the one further away from Hippolyta, and the nose, the shadow under the skull nose, is also the shadow under the big face's nose.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, and that's the trick I used to represent having the gods on Earth, where sometimes they were there as a body you could see, and sometimes they were there as an illusion in the background, which is something I frankly stole from the movie Midsommar.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but they did it in moving pictures, which doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
And I realized when I saw that movie, this would work so much better in comics. It's a very clever idea, but they didn't do it as well as I'm going to do it. So I had a lot of fun with it.
Well, I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous, and it seems like a very cool project to work on because it sort of steps outside of the usual superhero story, right? It gives you some
Oh yeah,
content to really explore creatively.
yeah, and it really gave Kelly Sue a chance to explore the mythology that built up by like by previous creators like Marston and George Perez,
Hmm.
and then something she doesn't agree as much with, and kind of push it together into a new story and a new way of looking at the story. I'm going to say that in the first issue, she did something which I thought would have been incredibly foolish for telling an emotionally impactful story,
Hmm.
which is she starts off telling the story of the Amazons from the viewpoint of the gods,
Hmm.
which you'd think it'd be so lofty.
Yeah.
It would, yeah, it kind of takes some of the drama away from it. You assume you'd want to start it from ground level and then kind of move on up a level, like
Hmm.
Wire or something. But she starts from the top, and it's still a gut punch. And you
Hmm.
kind of, it just builds and builds in pressure, and it just, by the time you get to Earth, there's this kind of, the pressure cooker is almost ready to explode, and then it shows Hippolyta's experience. And it's just so heartbreaking what happens to her.
Hmm.
Um, and that's where we start off with mine. After Hippolyta's heart and mind have broken, and we get to see where she goes on from there.
Well, and it seems like when you get into a story like that, you're talking about something that's going to be a lot more intimate than what you're going to have with sort of the broad sort of. I've seen the pieces you're talking about, those really big pieces from the previous volume, right? And it seems like you're going to want something very different in that case because you're digging into it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, Phil and Kelly Sue's issue ends with Hippolyta finally becoming an adventurer, going on the road. I say adventure in the D&D sense,
Yeah.
but yeah, by becoming essentially ready to become an action hero, but not quite there yet. She's got her equipment, she's got her clothes, she's got her mission. Um, and then yeah, we just show how hard it is, and also how she's changing the destiny of both the Amazons she wants to join and of the gods who created the Amazons, who think they know what they're doing, but um, read the issue. There's a lot of twisty stuff going on, and I literally represented the twisty stuff going on by putting golden proportion, golden spirals
Oh
in
yeah.
certain compositions to represent that.
Oh, that's awesome. So when you're working with something like this, one of the things that it seems is difficult for people to pull off effectively is creating art that merges with the story rather than either falls into the background or tries or kind of steps too much into the foreground. Like, how do you balance that? How do you balance making sure that your art is supporting what's happening as opposed to either disappearing or, sort of it's almost a partnership. Like, how do you do that?
Oh man, I, it's a lot like oh man, it is. It's a. I gave the comparison earlier that Volume One is like Stanley Kubrick and Alexander McQueen
Hmm.
collaborating on a movie, and both of them had styles that were very much where the artfulness, kind of frankly the pretension, comes forward, and it's so entertaining and so awe-inspiring. It becomes a major part of why you love what they do. I
Yeah.
mean, there are very few. I was going to say, are there very few? No, there are no non-pretentious Stanley Kubrick movies, but they're all wonderful.
Yeah.
Even his earliest works are, even the ones that aren't entertaining, are really pretentious. But then later on, he makes them entertaining and pretentious. But anyhow, the genius of what Phil Jimenez did is he kind of, especially for the the Greek gods, he really put the artifice forward so much it became part of the story,
Hmm.
and it became kind of how he defined the gods, and the
Yeah.
fact that he was able to still make the gods relatable and interesting, and you care about their pains and horror and their feelings, is just a work of genius. I mean, I am so much in awe of what he did, but that's not what I wanted to do with Volume Two, and I
Right.
am not the right guy to do a Phil Jimenez book. There's a
Right.
guy there's a guy who's good at that, and he lives in New York City. Um, yeah. So over here in Chicagoland, yeah, I wanted to focus on the humanity, and I'll say that one of the things is I used a technique which I invented, kind of a smudgy technique that looks a little bit like charcoaly pencil, but then color tinted,
Hmm.
uh, which allowed me to do very blurry backgrounds. and crowd scenes where I just do like almost like a thumb smudge for each
Yeah.
face, very easily. And then part of the theme of Wonder Woman Volume 2, or Wonder Woman Historia, the Amazon Volume 2,
Yeah.
gotta be specific, is every woman matters. They're all important. Every person has a story that is worth following. And somebody's like, oh man, I cannot draw a smudgy crowd scene right now because all of these people are important.
Right. Who you smudge, right, at that point.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was a much more detailed book than I expected it to be.
Hmm. That's very cool. So, one of the things that I've noticed is changed over time in comics is the older comics definitely have this feel of a radio play, right? A
Yeah.
lot of characters spend a lot of time describing what they're seeing and what they're doing. And that's something that's changed a lot over the years, especially as the art has become more in depth and more intricate. I mean, do you feel that there's a greater weight to convey the minor aspects of the story in your work than maybe there might have been for your predecessors?
I, the funny thing is that one of the most important early artistic pioneer in the comics medium,
Hmm.
Will Eisner, was a big proponent of show don't tell,
Yeah.
and he often made fun of people who would like have a scene of two people in an alley, one holding a gun, with a caption saying, "Then a shot rang out. I'm shooting you, you bastard! Ah, I've been shot."
Yeah, and that's what the older comics like, the old Marvel and DC stuff, they spent a lot of time describing what they were doing.
Yeah, but if you look at a Will Eisner comic from the late 1930s, 1940s, the storytelling is so visual. I mean, it's a brilliant melding of visual and verbal, and the two he never doesn't make the two do the same job.
Yeah.
And in fact, you make the assumption would be from uh, that you want complementary visuals and text,
Mhm.
and sometimes yes, but actually the very best comics are the ones where they're fighting with each other,
Huh.
where each gives a different meaning and a different message that adds nuance when you put them together, where it creates something new, as opposed to just efficiently showing that somebody got shot with a gun. My favorite example of this is Chris Ware short comic strip he did, where it was kind of a pulpy superhero versus mad scientist action story,
Mhm.
but all of the text was somebody telling a childhood story about being lonely, and no matter what the text vehicle was, like whether it was a caption box, like acting as narration, or two characters talking in sequence and having conversation, it was still the same voice telling the same story in a linear fashion all the way through all these text boxes. And there's a really clever interplay between this over-the-top, actiony, pulpy, visuals, and this very quiet, tender story coming through the words. And they totally fought each other, but they also
Mhm.
work together beautifully. And it's one of my favorite examples of letting the words and pictures fight and creating something new because of it.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
So, you're talking about the things that you love as we go along here. What are the things right now that you've been watching or reading or playing games you've been playing that have just been like totally pulling you in that you can't get away from it?
Okay. I'm going to start off really quickly with some of movement in games, but I never get a chance to play with it.
Yeah.
I've just read the rulebooks and it's so brilliant. I've heard people talking about it on podcasts. Games like Powered by the Apocalypse, Knives in the
Yeah.
Dark, these very narrow, I think it's called narrativist storytelling games and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And it's very much like what I love about AD&D, which is there are a lot of rules in AD&D. There's some reasonably thick books, but nobody really memorizes all of them except for the famous Tobacco to hit charts.
You're right.
Yeah, and everything else plays better if you ignore the rest and just make up the rules as you go along. And this is very much how these games work, with less backup.
Mhm.
Um, and it's very much it's it's it takes the improv element, the improv theater element of role playing games, and really emphasizes it. And it works very much like a writer's room where you handle plot lines. You can even toss characters back and forth sometimes. You don't just have the dungeon master describing the room. Everybody gets to describe the room. Everyone gets to describe what happens next and what the problems in. You can describe in an interesting way why you fail, and how you want to fail, because that's what your character would do in this situation. And motivations are like a part of your thing. It's like you want to be true to your character's motivations and weaknesses.
Yeah.
I mean, I love this, but I've never had a chance to play it.
All right, so now we know that next con that you go to, Gen Con, next time you get there, on your list is going to be to find one of those games to get into.
Yeah. Anyone out there? Yeah. I mean, at some point, I want one of my good friends to run a Fiasco game for me, because I've read the rules, but I can't. And I've watched other people play, but I can't totally understand it until I get a chance to play.
Right. Oh my gosh, there's so many games like that I would just love to play. And the ones you've listed, they actually fall into that category of things. It's like, God, if I only had time to just play games, that would be perfect. Or to have someone run them for me, more to the point. But
I do have friends who are brilliant Dungeons and Dragons DMs.
Yeah.
But and I love their games, but I'm so curious about what's on the other side of the pasture.
You're going to sneak off and go check out that other part of town where they play those crazy narrative games with their storytelling rules.
I'm storytelling curious.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. And so as far as comics go, do you have much time to read comics in all the time you spend working on them?
Not as much as I'd like. I'm just going to pull up something I just helped fund a Kickstarter today.
Okay.
First, I don't know when this is going to go out. It's probably going to be too late for all of you. So, suffer. Kaylin Smith. Oh God, I forgot I forgot the name, but I was just tweeting it. I was literally tweeting about this. Something good. I got the worst memory for names in the world. If you Kickstarter Kaylin Smith, and if I go to I'm now going to my Twitter because my memory is that bad. But it's
we'll let you pull it up, because I think that's one of the things that is also very cool is yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Kaylin Smith, for goodness sake, Kickstarter. My former Marvel editor Andy Schmidt and I and Kaylin did a panel at C2 2 weeks together. And at the end of it, I mean, I'd read some of her stuff, Kaylin's stuff before, but then at the end, Andy pulled me aside and said, check out her book, for goodness sake. And I bought volume 1 at the convention. And then I was like, man, I need the rest of this, but I'm going to wait till I see her again at a convention. And then she started her Kickstarter, and it's kind of like, oh, this is everything else, and I got to read it now. So, well, not now, but after it comes out. So, I figured that'd be a good way to do it.
Unfortunately for folks, it looks like she, I'm not sure if that's still going. This is volume 1, maybe it was volume 2, but it's definitely worth. This will get you headed in the right direction.
Look, for goodness sake, Omnibus.
Omnibus. All right.
Oh wait, the completed Omnibus hardcover. I guess that's an Omnibus too that you put the link up for.
And it looks like she's based out of Michigan, which is yet another Midwest connection for us. Oh yeah, so good news, everyone.
I have a nickname for the Michigan comic creators who I love, but they hate this nickname, which is the Michigan Mafia, because they have such a great time together.
So there you go. And that is still going right now. So you've got 29 days left to back it. So definitely check that out. That looks super cool. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I think is interesting, is that it feels like and this is true for gaming, it's true for writing, but there's so many ways that people can get their stuff out there that just like early on when we were doing this stuff, there's just nowhere to go with it, right? Maybe you could copy off a copy and beg some person at a store to carry it on their shelf, these handmade copies, but there was no way to hit a big audience with this stuff. And it just seems like that's such a revolution in the way that comics and books and games are being made.
Yeah. David Gallagher. David Gallagher of The Only Living Boy has this kind of way of describing his process, which I think applies to games too, which is you start off by distributing it free to everybody. So he does a webcomic. He'll often do his books as a webcomic. Yeah. Then he'll collect it together in a more convenient digital edition, which you have to pay a small price for. And all along, he's collecting data, email addresses, all that type of stuff. And then when he's ready to do a print edition, he'll actually go to a publisher, bring him all the stats of like how many people downloaded this, how many people bought the digital edition, and say, would you like to be the publisher who brings all the fraction of a gigantic number, and give them a print edition. And that's even a small fraction percentage of the total numbers is enough to make for a very successful print book.
Oh, that is very cool.
Yeah.
All right. I wish I'd known that before I'd started my projects, but you know,
sorry, man.
We make do with where we're at. So, well, you know, since we're talking about other artists, and just so we don't run out of time, because there's a couple of people we want to talk about. A lot of folks who watch the show know that I like to put a spotlight on some folks who we really like, we really respect, we think more people should be taking a look at, whether there's somebody completely unknown or whether there's someone known who is just like, you realize you really should be reading this person's stuff. One of the people you mentioned was Marc Crilly. Is that right?
Yeah, he's a Michigan creator.
Yeah.
Eisner winner. I believe he's an Eisner winner, and he's also you know, he's won a lot of awards. He does brilliant manga influence work. He's lived in Japan for a while, and also he has an incredibly successful YouTube educational channel teaching people how to do art. He has, I believe, 3 million followers or something crazy like that.
Wow.
Over 300 videos. And the really nice thing about his stuff is he has technically brilliant. He has great anatomy and perspective. He can do photorealistic drawings. One of his stunts he likes to do is the realism challenge, where he'll put like a piece of candy or a piece of, or a flower on his drafting table, put a webcam over it, and then do a pencil color drawing that looks exactly like the object on the object. It just looks like there's 2 of them on the table in front of him.
Wow.
So anyway, his anatomy, everything is solid. You will not learn things you will have to unlearn if you follow Marc Crilly, and with over 300 videos, it'll cover a lot of the subjects you might be interested in learning, like how to draw eyes, how to draw hands, how to draw different facial expressions, how to draw tigers and horses. So, you know,
that's fantastic. Really, because that's part of what I like to do with this show, is give a chance for people to learn, like, say, I want to do that. That's who I want to be. Right. It sounds like Marc is a great way for people to learn what they need to learn to get better at their craft. And speaking of people getting better at their craft, another person you brought up was someone who, if people were watching last week, Jim Zub.
Yeah. So when you become professional, even for just a little bit, and you're out there, and then people are coming up to you at convention saying, how do I get Marvel my idea for a Hulk story, or or how do I get DC, or, you know, the nightmare question, how do I get Marvel my idea for a Batman story? And you have to explain it to them, and they don't know any of it. Well, fortunately, Jim Zub has a blog, and if you look for his educational posts, he has detailed posts based on experience on how you do things like pitch a story to a publisher. How do you, if you're a writer, how do you find an artist to draw your comic book? Technical stuff on how scripts are formatted and stuff like that. Just all these different elements of how the publishing industry works. And that means all I have to do is tell this person the very basics, and then say, and you will learn all the rest through this blog that I'm writing down on this piece of paper handing to you. Jim Zub is a hero. We love him for having created that.
Well, and he is an educator, right? I mean, that's part of that's his career. And on top of his comics career, he's got multiple careers. And, you know, the way he explains things is just fantastic. He knows how to get those ideas across so that, yeah, it's got to be a wonderful joy. You probably just get little cards made that say, here's where you should go to get the answer to your question.
Yeah. And I'm also going to say, as a person, he very much comes across as Jim from The Office, but Canadian. He is that friendly.
He is. He's a really awesome guy. Cool. And then the last person we had to talk about here tonight was Corin Roberts. What can you tell us about her?
Oh, another Michigander. And if you have kids who'd like to learn the basics of drawings, go to her, corinroberts.net.
Oh, .net. Okay. I will fix that as we're speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you go to her appearances page, she does a lot of live conventions and live library events. She also does streaming library events and school events where your kids can log in for free and follow along and learn how to draw things like Star Wars characters or dragons or caricatures or things like that. And adults love them too. I've been able to sit in a few of her panels live, like at Dragon Con.
Yeah.
And the kids were having so much fun, but the parents were just laser locked onto their piece of paper and following along too. Everyone really likes drawing all the things she teaches. And I was in the room, so I was drawing along too, and I was having fun.
Okay, so I didn't make the connection till now, but it's possible that I've actually sat in on one of those and was laser locked on her as she did one of her online presentations. So that's awesome. That's very cool. Well, thanks for sharing those, folks. We'll definitely have to check out more of Mark Curley because I haven't actually looked at his things before. That's very, very, very cool to be able to lurk on those things. So what is, thinking about all the things we've talked about, thinking about, you've done work for Marvel and DC and you've done work on your own comic. I mean, what is something you just love to work on? Like, what is something you're like on, oh, someday I'll do this, whether maybe it's something that's not even being produced anymore. Is there something that's your dream project?
The thing is, I really, really like working with a brilliant writer who has a strong vision and is working on a story and characters they love. And I always find that so infectious that even if I don't appreciate that character at all, they make me love the character. Oh man, I'm going to say, like, I've stated this publicly before on Twitter. One of my goals, long term in my career, is to work with mostly prose writer Gwenda Bond.
Oh yeah,
she did a brilliant series. Oh yeah, and I met her at Gen Con.
Yeah,
she did a brilliant series of Lois Lane novels, which not enough people know about. It was YA Lois Lane books, and it's such an incisive, smart look at who Lois Lane is and how she became the person we know now as an adult. That I was like, it's obvious she loves comic books, and I want to tell a story that she writes. I don't care if it's of a DC character, a Marvel character, or something she makes up. Someday I'm going to draw a story she writes, and she knows this. And someday
she knows. All right, good.
Yeah. Someday.
Yeah, and her Lois Lane books are really fantastic, right? I mean, I think they're geared towards not middle grade YA, somewhere in between there.
Her Lois Lane books were aimed at YA, but she works. Yeah. She's kind of she is a cross-genre genius, where she just is able to hop from one form to another, seemingly effortlessly, and just needs to understand all of them and just hit the beat and put a twist on it and then leave you a little bit stunned. So she is good. She is really good, and she's really fun to read. And the characters make sense to me. I mean, their psychology and all that, and it's just great. I just love her work.
Well, and that's what I wanted. The thing I wanted to say was that sometimes people will see it and go, oh, they were suggesting that for a YA reader. And I'm like, no, you absolutely should just read it. It's a great book. It's definitely something to check out. Well, Gene, we are just about out of time and we have to start wrapping things up here, but this has been great. I really appreciate you being on the show. It's been a lot of fun. I hope we can have you back on sometime or see you at Gen Con, and hopefully we'll see that Gene Ha, Gwenda Bond cover at some point in the future.
Oh, it'll be a story when it comes out. It'll be many pages long.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you very much. It was great to talk to you tonight.
Thanks for inviting me on.
Yep. Well, everyone, that's it. You spent another hour sitting here with us talking out of character about all things nerdy, whether it's D&D or role-playing games or any of the other fun stuff that we all like to get into. Thank you very much for taking part tonight. We'll be back next week. Hope that you'll join us again, and thanks for watching the show.